classic Atari brand has been around just about as long as video games themselves. It's been up, it's been down, in fashion, out of fashion. Well, the brand is making yet another comeback, and this time it is as a very classic-looking, I'd say retro-styled set-top box called the Atari VCS. Now, this originally started out as an idea on Indiegogo about a year ago, a crowd-funded idea, and they raised more than $3 million to develop this into a working console. And now, not only is it really coming to life, it's ready to actually pre-order from real stores. The retail partners are Walmart and GameStop. Pretty much the storage you'd want to be in if you were selling a video, especially video game console. You can also order it from the Atari website. The interesting thing is each retailer has a different design. They all have a little bit of the look and feel of a classic Atari console, but one retailer is going to have a wood grain look for that real vintage kind of design. Another one is going to have yellow highlights and kind of an armored look. Another one is just going to be jet black, maybe some red highlights. But inside, it's all pretty much the same hardware. And talking to the people behind this latest version of the Atari, it's their own operating system based on Linux. So you can see that it'll play Android-style games. They're going to have a lot of their own licensed versions of classic Atari games presented within a very interesting, game-heavy UI. Think of it as a bit of a walled garden that's Atari-themed with games that you can download that are either classic or newer or reworked versions of classics. I thought one of the most fascinating parts of the new Atari is the retro-styled controller that will come with some bundles, or you can buy separately. It looks and feels a lot like that classic Atari 2600 joystick, and if you're old like me, you know that means one big red button and a very, very stiff joystick that you really have to work to move, but that actually helped controlling games like Missile Command and Pac-Man, where you really had to have very, very tight control of your movement. They've gone through a couple of different prototypes of this to get exactly the right feel. The latest version I tried, the stick feel was really good, and additionally, you can turn the top of the stick like a paddle, and if you're a real Atari 2600 connoisseur, you remember you had your joysticks and your paddles, so this builds the paddle functionality in for games like Breakout, or the one I always remember, Night Driver. They've also added a couple of extra buttons to the classic joystick, so you can do things like move back a step like you would in an Android device, and a little shoulder button for whatever retro modern style games you might develop that just need more than, frankly, one button. I also got a chance to try out Borderlands running on Linux, and that certainly worked acceptably well. And if you have there are plenty of Linux, games on Steam you can get that should also run fine. This can do 4K HDR output for both games and for streaming video apps, and you should be able to get Netflix and Hulu and other apps like that on there when the system finally hits stores, which they say is going to be in March 2020. The least expensive version has 4 gigs of RAM and costs $250. You can move up to 8 gigs of RAM for $279, and then for $389 you can get what they call the all-in version that includes both the retro joystick and a gamepad, which looks and feels a lot like an Xbox gamepad. You'll also be able to hook up pretty much any Bluetooth controller you want to it, like an Xbox controller, and that should work as well. So it is not quite as retro as one of those plug the joystick box into your TV and play these preloaded games on it, like the NES Classic or the little plug-and-play joysticks you see at Urban Outfitters or Walmart. And it's not a next-generation living room console like whatever the next Xbox Project Scarlet is going to be, or the PlayStation 5. It's somewhere in the middle, and seems to have some interesting angles for modders and homebrewers and people who like to play around with their hardware and operating systems. So look for the new Atari VCS in early 2020.